When Caleb invited his younger brother to live with him, he believed he was saving him. He did not expect to lose authority in his own home in the process. What unsettled him most was not discovering the affair. It was realizing that, somewhere along the way, he had become a supporting character in a story unfolding under his own roof. Hi everyone, I'm Mia. Thank you for being here. Tonight's story is about loyalty between brothers, the psychology of being the provider, and what happens when generosity slowly turns into humiliation. It's about the quiet erosion of masculine certainty, and how sometimes betrayal doesn't enter through strangers, but through family. Let me tell you about Caleb. Caleb was 46 years old and had built his life carefully. Not ambitiously in the flashy sense, but deliberately. He valued structure, responsibility, and predictability. His colleagues trusted him. His bills were paid on time. His marriage, while not passionate in the cinematic sense, felt stable in a way that many men quietly appreciate after enough years. His wife, Jenna, was intelligent and perceptive. She could read emotional shifts before they were spoken. She had a sharper temperament than Caleb, and in the early years he had admired that contrast. She challenged him. She brought momentum to his steadiness. Over time, however, their dynamic had shifted into something more routine than electric. They were not unhappy. But they were no longer actively curious about each other. The disruption came through Caleb's younger brother, Ryan. Ryan had always been the unpredictable one. Charismatic, impulsive, capable of intense enthusiasm followed by equal collapse. When Ryan called late one evening and admitted he needed to leave an abusive relationship, Caleb felt the old instinct surface immediately: protect, solve, stabilize. Jenna did not hesitate when Caleb asked if Ryan could stay with them temporarily. She said it was the right thing to do. Her response felt compassionate, decisive. Caleb appreciated that about her. Ryan arrived with little more than a duffel bag and visible exhaustion. He appeared smaller than Caleb remembered, as though something in him had been worn down. Caleb felt protective, almost paternal. He offered the guest room without conditions and insisted that Ryan take time to recover. Within 2 weeks, Caleb helped him secure a basic position at the same company where he worked. Around the same time, Jenna, who had been dissatisfied with her previous job, applied for an administrative role in the same office building and was hired. At first, the arrangement seemed practical. Efficient. Caleb drove both of them to work in the mornings. It saved money and simplified logistics. He paid the household expenses without discussion, telling Ryan there was no rush to contribute financially. He covered groceries, utilities, gas. He never framed it as sacrifice. He saw it as leadership. What Caleb did not anticipate was how quickly familiarity would grow between Ryan and Jenna once they shared not only a home, but also a workplace. Their conversations began innocently enough: shared observations about coworkers, small jokes about office politics. But over time, Caleb noticed a subtle rhythm developing between them. They laughed easily. They referenced moments he had not witnessed. They seemed to exist in small pockets of shared context that excluded him. He told himself he was imagining it. Still, he began observing more closely. Jenna started investing more effort into her appearance before work. Not dramatically, but noticeably. There was intention where there had once been casual indifference. Caleb mentioned it one morning, lightly, and she brushed it aside with a smile that did not fully reach her eyes. Ryan, meanwhile, seemed to be regaining confidence. He worked out in the garage most evenings. He became more animated, more alive. Caleb noticed how Jenna's gaze lingered occasionally, though he could not determine whether it was admiration or simply attention. The first moment Caleb questioned his own perception happened on a Thursday evening. He returned home early from work because of a cancelled meeting. As he stepped into the kitchen, he heard laughter from the living room, not ordinary laughter, but something softer and lower. Intimate in tone. When he entered, they were sitting closer than necessary on the couch, reviewing something on Ryan's phone. They moved apart quickly, but not dramatically. Jenna greeted him as though nothing required explanation. Caleb felt something tighten inside his chest. It was not proof. It was not even accusation. It was a shift in atmosphere that made him feel like a guest in his own house. He did not confront them that night. Instead, he lay awake beside Jenna, staring into the darkness. He replayed the image repeatedly, questioning whether he had exaggerated it in his mind. He disliked the version of himself that suspected his own brother. The following week, he found himself paying attention to patterns. Jenna and Ryan often left the office at similar times. They sometimes returned home separately, claiming errands or delays. Caleb noticed that Jenna had begun locking her phone with a new passcode. When he asked casually about it, she said she had updated her privacy settings after a software change. He nodded, but the explanation felt rehearsed. One evening, while Jenna was showering and Ryan had stepped outside, Caleb picked up her phone from the kitchen counter. He stood there longer than he expected, staring at the dark screen as though it might accuse him of betrayal for even considering it. He had never searched her phone in 16 years of marriage. His hands felt unfamiliar when he finally entered the passcode he had memorized from watching her type it days earlier. There were no explicit messages. No photographs. But there was a deleted conversation thread with Ryan's name. Recently cleared. The absence of visible content felt louder than any explicit confirmation. Caleb replaced the phone carefully and sat at the table, staring at the wood grain until Jenna returned. That night, he experienced something he had not felt in years, humiliation layered with comparison. He imagined Ryan younger, more spontaneous, less burdened by routine. He imagined Jenna seeing in him the vitality that Caleb himself had slowly traded for reliability. He hated those thoughts, but they persisted. 2 nights later, he opened the closet and pulled down a suitcase. He placed it on the bed and stared at it for several minutes. Leaving would restore a form of dignity. It would allow him to control the narrative before anyone else could define it for him. But leaving would also mean admitting that his own home had become hostile territory. He closed the suitcase without packing it. Instead of confrontation, he chose observation. The confirmation came not through dramatic discovery, but through timing. One Friday, Caleb told them he would be working late. Instead, he parked down the street and walked back quietly an hour later. The house was dim. As he entered, he heard movement from the guest room. The door was partially closed. He did not need to see more than the positioning of 2 shadows to understand. He stood there longer than he should have, his jaw tightening until it ached. The sound of his own breathing felt foreign. For a moment, he questioned whether he was misinterpreting what he heard. Whether exhaustion had distorted his perception. Then he heard Jenna's voice, low, unmistakable. The doubt dissolved. Caleb did not burst in. He did not shout. He stepped outside again and sat in his truck with his hands on the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard until the shock settled into something colder. What disturbed him most was not only the betrayal. It was the realization that he had financed it, facilitated it, and unknowingly provided the stage. When he finally confronted them the next morning, neither denied it. Ryan looked ashamed but said little. Jenna, however, did not cry. She said the connection had developed gradually. She said it was not planned. She said it just happened. Caleb almost laughed at that phrase. He asked the question that had been burning quietly inside him, whether it had started before Ryan moved in. Both insisted it had not. He did not know if he believed them. More than anger, he felt displacement. As if he had been replaced not only as a husband, but as the central man in his own life. He considered revenge. He imagined exposing them at work, telling family, dismantling Ryan publicly. But each fantasy felt temporary and beneath him. What lingered instead was the fear of appearing weak if he stayed. In the end, he asked Ryan to leave immediately. There was no physical confrontation. No shouting match. Just a quiet instruction delivered with a voice Caleb barely recognized as his own. Jenna expected Caleb to fight harder, to rage, to demand promises. Instead, he withdrew. And that withdrawal frightened her more than anger would have. Caleb eventually understood something that unsettled him. He had confused being indispensable with being valued. He believed that providing shelter, income, and stability made him untouchable. But emotional distance creates openings that generosity cannot close. Long marriages don't collapse loudly, they erode quietly. What hurt Caleb most was not that his brother desired his wife. It was that she allowed herself to desire someone who needed saving instead of the man who had already built safety. Sometimes the real humiliation is realizing that your role was assumed, not appreciated. Thank you for listening to this story. If it resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think, and it allows me to continue telling stories like this with honesty and depth. I'm curious about your perspective. Was Caleb wrong to bring his brother into his home without clearer boundaries? Or was the betrayal inevitable once emotional distance already existed? Let me know in the comments. I read them carefully. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next story.